It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, March 29th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is so bummed the trap trapped.
The trap door was there.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. Subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we did talk about some trap possibilities, and some of those specific scenarios came into play during the game against Montreal. But I do want to talk about the brief availability that Danny Briere had yesterday because it was fascinating, related to some of the other external news that came out in the Flyers goaltender world. So we had him talk about Aleksei Kolosov. He was asked specifically about that, and said that there was no exact timeline because of immigration stuff. But it was very clear that yes, they're going to bring him over. They just don't know when he's going to get in because of the immigration stuff. But that he would start with the Phantoms if the timing works.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt that that was going to happen. I think people were kind of getting overly excited, jumping the gun. And because he's a Belarusian, it's a different thing altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why there's no way to predict it.
Exactly. And there's also the technicality of the fact that Felix Sandstrom was recalled to the Flyers on an emergency basis. And if they were to put Kolosov in that spot to try and get him time with the Flyers, like they have to go to the league because it's a special circumstance here because the emergency recall is directly tied to the Carter Hart situation, which is
Right.
As Briere said, it's its own special situation in and of
Right.
itself. So it's unclear whether he could even qualify to get time with the Flyers this season. So I think that's why Briere was like, nah, he'll be with the Phantoms.
Yeah, I think our take was right. He might get a game in with the Phantoms before it's all said and done.
All right. Then, given all that, he did not talk about Ivan Fedotov, which we talked about on the Wednesday show during the mailbag segment. And at that time, when we recorded, there was no indication
None.
that any of this was going to happen. But his contract was terminated by his KHL club in Moscow, and there is talk that he is going to try and come over here. The thing is that he's still under contract with the Flyers, technically. Like they just pushed his contract
because of the
over.
tolling thing. I forgot about that the other day when I posted that he's technically a UFA. No, I guess he is under contract for one more year because of the tolling. Because I think originally, I don't think Cap Friendly had that right. I think that's where I got it wrong. Because I don't know. I'm not a GM. I go by Cap Friendly.
Right. But so technically he is, or the Flyers have the rights to him in the NHL if he were to come over here.
Right.
It is not clear yet if and when he's coming over here. But there's certainly more to talk about on that front should anything change. And I'm sure we'll talk about it on the Monday show because it's a long weekend. Things happen.
It is a long weekend. I mean, he first has to show up in town before all these other consternations that are going on online are even worthy of being talked about, honestly.
Right. There were also some player updates. Seeler is getting closer. Maybe he'll play this weekend, maybe after the weekend. But it seems like Drysdale, it'll be at least another week, maybe two.
That's disturbing with Drysdale because, like I said, we're pretty sure it's the same shoulder. And now he's really, I mean, this has been weeks and weeks and weeks longer than, probably the initial thought was. So it's almost better not to play him. I mean, you can't risk him having long-term problems with his shoulder because those things just don't go away after a while. Ask Tarasenko, he's had how many shoulder operations?
Right.
And that
And
goes back to his World Junior days, just so people know. He first did it during the World Juniors because I asked him about it in the locker room. And that's like 2011, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So just to show you how it could linger.
Right. And it seems clear that Ristolainen is not coming back this
He's
season.
not coming back. And that's whether it's neck or it's, post concussion or something, for people that think now that he could be easily traded, he can't because he hasn't played.
Yep. Exactly. So that was kind of the gist of what Danny Briere had to say prior to the game against Montreal. And we talked about the trap situation and we talked about whether or not they needed to just kind of adjust their style a little bit against Montreal just to give themselves a little bit of relief, and at the same time have a better opportunity to maintain more puck possession and prevent Montreal's top scorers from having more chances. And they did not follow our advice.
A couple of times they had puck possession, 2 or 3 key times, but not a lot.
No, I would say now the block shots were, Montreal almost doubled up on the Flyers on block shots. So,
but that's understandable because Primo doesn't have a lot of NHL experience. So
true.
I would have done the same thing for him.
Yeah. I think that there are two main things for me. Number one, the power play, obviously 0 for 4.
It's just
what do we do here?
Right. It's so bad, and I can't believe behind closed doors that Torts isn't more frustrated than he lets on with that, because it's costing him games. It's hemorrhaged them so many, possibilities here. And again, look, not every time a team goes on a power play, they're guaranteed to score. So like anything that you saw that you thought was a penalty that wasn't called, you also have to remember if the Flyers got an extra power play, they could have gone 0 for 5. So, but the point is, you do want it to be at least, 30%, something, reasonable, so that it can pull you through in some games. And it just hasn't been the case.
Yeah. And then, the flip side to that, the penalty kill, do we have to really worry about the penalty kill right now?
A little bit. It's starting to sag as players' key components of that penalty kill are banged up. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but like Konechny in the third period, he got over that bench slow, and they showed him he grimaced. So he's got something going on that he's gutting it through. Sanheim's not practicing, so we know he's still banged up. Like, those are key components right there. So
yeah,
they're banged up.
They clearly miss Nick Seeler on that penalty.
Oh yeah,
kill.
No question.
So I think that help could be on the way on that front. It just depends on the timing and what percentage Nick Seeler is back at, because
but they still have to score too.
Well, that is absolutely true. I'm just saying they are getting scored on
consistently
the
score.
Right. But getting scored on the penalty kill is something we didn't have to worry about for most of the season.
True. And that was the wearing down point that we sort of cautioned against. And, some of that's coming true now because, again, I blame this game a little on the coaching staff in the sense that they definitely should have had these guys fired up to start out fast. They did not start out fast. It took them a long time to get their game going, as John likes to say. And that's a problem. That has been a problem, actually, now. The team acts like they haven't been losing games because sometimes they've been getting the loser point, but they're losing games here. Like, you go look down the stretch. How is Washington catching up? Because they're losing games. that's how they're catching up. It's just the NHL, when you lose a game and you get a point, it doesn't sting as bad. But Washington's literally a point behind. Now the Islanders all of a sudden have a chance again too, because they play the Flyers. Like, so for anybody who thinks that, these other games now down the stretch, it's just going to be a breeze, and no, they're fighting themselves in a lot of this.
Yeah, and I think the other issue that we've been talking about for, the last week or two is ice time for specific
Oh
players.
yeah.
And Cam York, 28 plus minutes in a 60-minute game. Like the math ain't math in there.
No, it's not good. It just, you can only do so much. And the mental fatigue from that is what I worry about. The guy's in great shape. Cam York's in great shape.
Yeah.
I don't worry about what 28 minutes does to his legs or anything. It's the mental fatigue of playing that position.
Yeah. And, I think that it's just been this like rotation, right, of who gets overplayed.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
and I think that's really what concerns me. It's not, yeah, to your point, it's not Cam York getting those minutes in this particular game. I think it's just this cycle of, you overplay Sanheim for a long time. You overplay York for a stretch. They overplayed Konechny for quite some time in this season. And I think that um that's concerning, where they pick one player, it seems like, and just completely overplay them in a particular game.
Yeah, and I got to answer a question that's been thrown at me in a couple different ways during emails and texts. And basically the thought is, don't the Flyers have another winger they could bring up, because like Atkinson doesn't seem to be able to do anything? And I said, Marody got hurt, but technically Tanner Lazinski, if you put him in there in a limited role, would do fine. And I think we both know
Yeah.
that. But
Yep.
John doesn't seem to like him. So I think that's the bigger problem. Is it's not who the Flyers have or can't use, is who will John play.
Well, the problem there lies is that they only have emergency recalls left, so they can't
Correct.
even bring
They
him up.
can't now. No. They could
Yeah.
have, but they can't now.
Yeah. So,
Although you
this
can
is where we
manipulate the emergency recalls a little bit. You can.
sure, I guess. But, it it would definitely, stand out a little bit. Alright, well, hopefully the next game against the Chicago Blackhawks is also not a trap, but, we gotta talk about them, because obviously there's always a threat there with Connor Bedard. We'll do that coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
On our Monday show, we are going to talk Flyers versus Islanders. We will be recapping the Blackhawks game that we're about to preview, and have our nemesis of the week. The Chicago Blackhawks, Russ, are not a good team. Let's be
No,
real.
we know that.
How they are last in the Central, second to last in the NHL to the Sharks. When we saw them last, the Flyers won 3-1 in Chicago on February 21st. At that time, Chicago was the worst team in the league, but now it's the Sharks. So they're moving on up in the world.
They've made improvements.
They have. They absolutely have. Of course, they have struggled with some key injuries, like Taylor Hall is still on IR. And at the time when we faced them before, Athanasiou was on IR, but he's back now. Nikita Zaitsev was on IR, but he's back now. So this is a different team than we faced last time.
It is different. It's still a fast team, at least with their top six. Athanasiou could really burn. Obviously, Bedard can. I worry about Kurashev because he's a very skilled guy. They have some toughness too. They do, and so like in that Montreal game, Montreal pushed around the Flyers a bit, and that doesn't mean having Nick and Nick Delorier in there is going to be the answer. By the way, like I kept hearing that, and it's like he only plays 8 minutes. There's times where he's not going to be on the ice. So, but Nick Foligno and Jason Dickinson, they're guys that not only can score, but they play tough and they bang and crash and they go into the crease. And let's face it, the Flyers have not been great about clearing the crease the last 3-4 games.
Right. And I think that that's going to be the issue is that first of all, are they going to like overcompensate for Bedard to try and push him to the side and leave other guys open up front? That's
Yeah, because he
the
can
number
pass the puck
one.
too. That's the thing. He's not just
Yeah.
he's really more of a playmaker than a shooter, but he scores too, obviously. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a thing. And if he draws people to him, that's something. Yeah, this is going to be about the coaching and matchups. This game should be not a walkthrough, but it should be a win, and it's a must win. And really, the matchup should be, get Konechny against their third line, get Konechny against their third pairing. That's what you have to do. Stay away from, Vlasic and Jones because they're good. I mean, Alex Vlasic's
Yep.
having an amazing year. He was a guy at the NTDP that, played okay. He's really made some strides. Like he's a good all around defenseman now. And Seth Jones is definitely doing well. So they
Yeah.
still
And
have some weapons.
I will say about Seth Jones, he was probably not having a good season for the first half, but he has actually like gotten better and better as this second half has continued and has been a lot better defensively. He's gotten activated offensively like he likes to a little bit more. So I wouldn't just call him a pushover like you might have 4 or 5 months ago.
Right. And Kevin Krasinski has a lot of ability as far as breakout passes, power play. I know their power play is only 16%. 16 still better than the Flyers, though. Just saying. But I'm just saying Krasinski has offensive ability. It's just he hasn't really clicked yet. But still, as bad as their power play is, do you really want to put them on the power play with Bedard on there? No, I don't think you really want to give him that extra ice. So I think the same thing holds. Try not to do anything stupid. And I do want to point out something because I think I've said this before. They have been playing a little stupid and getting into these 4-on-4 situations. And when Hathaway's the guy that gets him into the 4-on-4, that's when they're in trouble because, he's a decent defensive player and he's a good skater. But when he's on the bench and it's a 4-on-4, there's a lot of room out there against the Flyers. And so they got to stay away from those 4-on-4 situations. That's not good for them.
No, I think that those situations are especially when the Flyers have trouble with somebody backdoor or leaving somebody open out in front of the net.
Because when it's a 4-on-4, Bedard's right out there. He goes right over the boards.
Exactly. And so I think that that's when they're going to have to really pay special attention to that because I have noticed that, to your point, they aren't clearing guys out in front of the net or guys are getting behind them.
They're getting behind them. Yeah. They're going a little wide and then they're cutting back in and they're getting behind them. But in these pileups, they're losing these pileups.
So I think that, and that's just honestly, it's wear and tear and it's mental exhaustion.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a skill thing. It's not a
for that it's
thing.
not.
So I think that's where the ice time comes into play, right? So it all relates together as far as how to execute effectively.
Yeah, they have to come out with a lot of jump. They haven't really come out in the first period with a ton of jump. I mean, I guess that Ranger game they had a little more than usual, but that's like the only one you could point to. So they do need to do that, and they do need to try and get up quickly, because otherwise it's like anything else. If you keep a bad team in the game, you're asking for trouble. They've got nothing to lose again, and they're actually more rested. They're probably in town a day before the Flyers are. So there's that factor too.
Well, I think that the Blackhawks did play the same time as the Flyers played against Ottawa, but I
Shorter
think
flight.
maybe they could be better rested.
I think they're a little better rested, because they were talking about the Flyers not getting in real late, because you know what it is? It's not the distance of the flight, it's the Canadian holdup.
Yeah.
So that
That's
definitely
fair.
that gives Chicago a little more rest.
Yeah, we'll see. But as far as goaltending goes, Mrazek played for the Blackhawks against Ottawa. I see him playing again just because I think Mrazek has had some success against the Flyers.
He played a decent game last game, and he's played better this year than I thought he had left in him. So, yeah, I think it's going to be Mrazek.
Now, this is where, do you put Sandstrom in this game?
They can't. They can't afford to do it.
I think they do anyway, though.
I mean, I'm not going to kill them if they do. Like, if they say, hey, this is our rotation, we're sticking to it, I respect that. But this also may be the situation where the coach says, we got to get a win here. So both ways sort of work. If it's me, I actually would use Urson. I would have to use Urson. And if I have to take him out, fine. But I just feel like I'm going to save Sandstrom for the Sharks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Well, we'll see how this one goes, and we'll obviously talk about it on the Monday show. In the meantime, the Frozen Four is underway, and the Flyers have some prospects out there, so we want to check in on how they are doing. Plus, we're going to take a look at the week ahead with a really interesting schedule, I think, for the Flyers. Are you watching sports on cable TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The first day of the Frozen Four, Russ, was like Heart Attack City.
Oh, yeah. Which is what it usually is.
Right. So I would say, like, obviously the biggest game of day one was Denver versus UMass in a spectacular double overtime game. Of course, Massimo Rizzo, who we've talked about a little bit on the show. We're still not sure what's going on there as far as a relationship with the Flyers.
No, and he's got an injury. So right now he's out.
Yeah, but Denver was victorious 2-1 over UMass. Then, of course, we had the other big game, I thought, was Minnesota versus Omaha. Bryce Brodzinski on Minnesota. Minnesota wins that one 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, this is me, right? This is me talking. If I want to make the Flyers organization better, I'm signing Brodzinski and I'm signing Jackson Nelson, because together they're really good. I can bring them both into Lehigh. They can play on the same line, and I've got instant chemistry. Now, you might say, hey, Nelson's in his fifth year, whatever. Okay, great. But he still has to score, and he is. He's got like 10 goals lately. And remember, I brought him up last year. So I think you bring both those guys in. I see no reason not to do it. They play well together. And Brodzinski, both those Brodzinski brothers, man, there's something about them. They may not be terrific, skilled players, but they know how to play hockey nuts and bolts. They do.
Yeah, they work so hard. That's the thing. Like, you will never see either one of them let up for a second.
Never.
So that's something I appreciate about them. Then we had Boston University won 6-3 over RIT. Devin Kaplan had 2 assists in that game.
Yeah, that's nice. To me, it's an easy game, but RIT was an older team, so sometimes the older teams can make it more difficult. If you're older and you've got the right mix, like Quinnipiac has had the last few years, then you're really dangerous. So this was a good test for BU, but yeah, easy. I think an easy win.
Yeah, and then Cornell won over Maine,
which is expected.
well.
But Cornell's been really good. There's players on that team too that the Flyers could be scouting.
Yeah. And then today, the action continues. BC versus Michigan Tech. We don't have to care about Boston College anymore in Flyers land.
No, but I think just as a hockey fan, people are going to watch.
Of course.
They're the show right now. I'm not convinced they're
Yeah.
winning, but they're the show. Like, they're just fun to watch.
Yeah, I think just from a rivalry standpoint, Michigan State versus Western Michigan is going to be a lot of fun just because of the in-state rivalry. Of course, we have Alex Bump on Western Michigan.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough game for Bump because he's going to go up against Trey Augustine, right? And yeah, Trey Augustine's had quite the year. Quite the year.
Yeah, and another fun one is going to be Wisconsin versus Quinnipiac.
Yeah, I think Quinnipiac wins that one. I think
so too.
But there's some good matches down the line here. And some of the ones you mentioned today, like, this is fun. I was supposed to be there, but I've had this eye issue, so I didn't go. I'm already having FOMO, so, you know.
Yeah. And then North Dakota versus Michigan. Owen McLaughlin, of course, on North Dakota.
Now, they have a chance of winning. I think that would be interesting if they could pull that.
Yeah. So a lot of really good college hockey action in the Frozen Four tournament. So check it out. The Flyers week ahead, Isles, Sabres, and Blue Jackets. Like, that's 6 points. They really should get 6 points out of that.
Well, I don't know. The Islanders are tough now. So that game, I think, has now become a coin flip. And the Sabres have sort of righted their ship. I mean, I know they had a really bad game the other day. They did.
Yeah.
But before that, they were winning games. And so you never know what you're going to get out of that Sabres crew. But Jack Quinn's back, and they've got talent. The Sabres game is definitely the 2 points that you have to have. And it's one of those games where it's like, if you just play sound hockey, they'll eventually give you the game. But if you make mistakes, you know, they still have Tice Thompson. They still have Skinner. They have offensive firepower on that team and pretty good defense. So you do have to watch out. Their record is worse than what their talent level is, for sure. And the Blue Jackets, you don't know. Like, right now, they're pretty horrible. I think that's a guaranteed. But again, I don't think anything's guaranteed down the stretch if guys are hurting. So they have to take care of their own business. And they've been saying that for a while. But honestly, they haven't been lately. So, you know, over this long haul, they need to do better because other teams, I mean, if, you know, and again, Washington dropped one. They're lucky Washington did drop one, or they would have already been ahead of them. But a lot of teams have games in hand on the Flyers. It's 1 or 2, and Detroit, I think, has 2, and the Caps have 2. So this is, you know, it's not a great spot to be in.
It is crunch time for sure.
They're being chased. They're being hunted. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is a guaranteed 6 points. I'm saying this is a must get.
Oh, no, I get what you're saying.
You know?
I agree with that. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to touch on one more bit of news that I think is super exciting for a Flyers fun thing here is that on Saturday, the Flyers are going to officially announce that they are partnering with the University of Delaware as they are building a D1 women's team in their program. Yeah, and I think this is incredible that they are doing this. It shows a strong support for women's hockey. Maybe this will help them get a PWHL team in town. But I think
it can't hurt.
It can't hurt, and it's also just the right thing to do, honestly. And Delaware, everything they have done so far in trying to, you know, in announcing this program, in how they're looking at it, they're going to play in 25-26 is going to be their first season. They've already hired a head coach in Allison Kumi, who comes directly from Penn State and has experience at Boston University as well. And so, they're raring to go and they have a plan, and to get the Flyers involved, I think is just fantastic.
No, that's great. And I think I read yesterday that Michigan is finally seems eager to get a women's team. And imagine that amount of power getting another women's team. Like, this is a good time for women's hockey. And I think the Illiches are spearheading that. And that's great. If
Well, the
more of
fact that
this
the state
happens,
of Michigan had 0 D1 women's
it's
programs in
crazy.
it,
Crazy.
unbelievably bonkers.
But
So,
I think they're
yeah,
gonna finally
love it.
correct that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, love it. Love all of that. All right, that will do it for today's show. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows like Locked On NHL. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV channels app. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great weekend, everyone.